Hello, so I got a request from the Lonely Girl, that's the username, to do a video on the home power rule and the tyranny that happens with local governments and why that is so dangerous and so big. So I'll do a quick explanation of it. The short is that most cities, that is counties, cities, towns, the smaller subdivisions of states within many states, have something called a home power rule or municipal power rule. And what that means is that, generally speaking, cities actually have some of the broadest based legal powers in enacting different types of legislation as to property within the jurisdiction of that locality. And this level of intrusion is significant. It's in some states led to cities being able to wholly operate power plants, waste management, and other types of services that really you'd think a private business would probably be providing. But in fact, the cities have been upheld in many cases to be able to effectively either totally rule in a domain or compete with many businesses, whether it's communication lines or electrical services, gas services, anything that you can imagine that you think of utilities wise, and even some things beyond that. And in addition to that business aspect, which is unusual because you don't usually think of government in the business of business in that way. They also have the ability to create rules and regulations as to property that is very significant if you've never really gone through the thought process before of zoning, planning, and getting approvals. And some places there's crazy amounts of red tape you have to go through just to even get a modification to your building that you've had, and courts really uphold this. There is no even nod to this concept of a allodial title or a castle doctrine or something of that nature, saying that you really are the one who owns your private property. Really and truly, it's like you can't do anything without seeking permission from these overlords and these landlords. You can't own your home. There is no American dream. Everything you do is eventually going to be taxed. There's going to be taxes that go, they'll have a millage rate for going to your local school. They might have it going for water treatment or facility treatment of different types of waste products and stuff like that. And those are all good, desirable things in and of themselves. Education's great, of course. Electricity, gas, taking care of your waste product, awesome stuff. Septic treatment. Wonderful things, nothing wrong with that. The issue is that these cities have this power to insert themselves economically and to keep out any sort of competition from arising, and that's especially been problematic. Has been seen over the years in communication, where a lot of private companies seek to do better, and somewhat too in sanitation. Even there have been cities that totally rule in that domain of sanitation, even if other private companies, think of waste management, they're a really big one, could compete. So it's pretty scary stuff when you think about what they can stop you from doing, and we've seen a lot of this lately with people trying to plant gardens in their front lawn. That's one of the latest outrages, is people are trying to make use of their land for their own private purposes. And sometimes they have like a homeowner association stuff issues, but there's been plenty of cases where it's just the city. The city's like, no, you can't do that. We have regulations about how your front yard should look. It should look grassy and perfect. And a lot of these micro tyrants who are truly psychopathic get into these positions of power. They got nothing better to do than to go around the city and bother people. Maybe they have a sign that, as a business, they have a sign. And it's like, oh, your sign's 1 foot too far out. Got to move it back or we'll fine you. And all these different types of little things that you may not be exposed to. If you never owned a business or managed a business, you may have not seen as much of that. If you never owned a home, you may have not seen as much as that when it comes to development. I've done a lot of those different types of things, so I come across it all the time. And when you engage it, it's overwhelming to think, whoa, like I don't just have to deal with the state. I don't just have to deal with the federal government, right? I have to now deal with a county, with the city, and be like, oh my gosh, I might have to get, a city permit and then a planning permit and a zoning board that comes in. And even some of these cities that, I mean, I don't even know how they get away with it, but I've read a couple where they have certain regulations, like if you have a home-based business and you would have a couple people over, then you need $300,000 in liability insurance. I mean, just stuff that is absolutely crazy when you think about the nature of owning a home or having private property. When you're like, oh yes, I just paid six figures, three, four, $500,000 for my home. Oh, the American dream, I've got it. And then it's like, wait, no, somebody is telling me everything I can and can't do with this. And we're not talking about stuff that harms somebody. We're not saying, oh, well, you can't exactly blow off bombs in your backyard with a shrapnel hits the neighbor. We're talking about stuff like, whether or not you have three people or over, four people over. We're talking about whether or not you have a business and the sign is a certain height, or you're trying to build a tree house in your backyard. And these are little things that back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s weren't quite as much an issue. You know what I mean? That was just a normal thing back then back in the World War I era. Then the government was trying to suppress everything in terms of censorship against the government because of the world wars, especially in America. But that's another issue. But the point is that the tyranny is great, where these powers are small and they're kind of centralized within these bodies that people are just not used to interacting with. It's, what I mean? It's not very common for people to think about city council people and stuff like that. A lot of people, they're familiar with senators and like House of Representative stuff. You hear stuff about presidency, but when it comes to your local board and stuff like that, of people who are governing things or school boards and stuff like that, a lot of people just aren't that engaged unless they're forced to engage in it. And these people are making major decisions, passing major laws, then you may not run across them until it's like, oh, I'm starting to do this in my front yard, and suddenly, oh, some city enforcer comes along and is like trying to give you tickets, and it's really extensive, and it's really amazing just how much the cities are able to infringe on the rights, or the rights that one would expect to hold over such a substantial stake of property and historical, true ownership. The concept of the castle doctrine, which embodies personal protection, really speaks to that idea of you having true domain. So that's really what the home power rule is, municipal power rule is, and that comes across many different states in their localities. So I hope that helps explain it, and I appreciate your question. Take care.